The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu.
So this is Dr. Chris McCusker. Half of you know her, have lived beside her, so it's okay. She's a professor in the history department, expert in Southern history, popular music, musicology, is also the co-director, co-oligarch of the Oral History Association. I feel that's an oligarchy. I feel it fits well. You and Lewis do it. So she's going to talk today. The title that I have to say, I came up with in case she doesn't like it.
No, I do like it.
I put it upon her, American History with a Beat, teaching with popular music, because at the time that I wrote it, I thought that sounded witty. So, but she's far wittier than I am. So without further ado, Dr. McCusker, take it away.
Okay, so Jeremy, you've heard some of this stuff, and you will have heard a little bit, not a lot. So for those of you who don't know me, or I haven't had in class or didn't live around the corner from, I've been a professor here for 19 years, but my musical training started when I was a little kid, when my dad, who was a beautiful singer but not a great guitarist, he was singing one night. I was 9 years old, and I started harmonizing with him naturally by ear. And it became an opportunity to join that all too famous group, Bob and the Girls, my dad and my sisters and me. And then when we added my stepbrother and my husband, we became the non-nuclear family singers. But my one claim to fame was I used to train professionally for voice, and my singing teacher got a call from Barry Manilow's people one night and said, will you put together a choir so we can, to back Barry up. So I sang backup for Barry Manilow 8 nights back in 1982 or 3. I don't remember. I have real live educational experience. I do have a PhD in history, ethnomusicology, and folklore. I've written 3 books on country music and gender. I'm in the middle, at least one more book on that. But I teach classes here, undergraduate and graduate classes on American popular music. Or if you've been in my Great Depression class or my post-45 class, music is integrated into the class because it's a site of cultural discussion, and it is a site of negotiation of what it means at certain points in the past to be an American. It's not entertainment necessarily, it is a site of negotiation. I should tell you that I do wear another hat. I run the Oral History Association with my Gore Center colleague, Louis Kiriakoutis. We are happy at any point, if you ever have the need to talk about oral history and your students, we're happy to come and talk to you, do some training. We've been doing a lot, speaking with a lot of librarians lately. And so we're happy to do that, because the whole point of this being here is not just to make the Oral History Association better, but to bring oral history to MTSU and see what it can do in other people's classrooms and other spaces like libraries. All right, so why would you incorporate music into the classroom, and how do you do it? That's a question we're going to consider today. How and why does the incorporation of music into classrooms facilitate learning? How and why does that facilitation, that incorporation, move students from reading and comprehending to reading, comprehending, and analyzing? So my training at Indiana University is in ethnomusicology, which is a big old fancy word that basically means the study of people making music. The study of people making music. And so it's the people and the spaces where they are musical. It does something for a society. It's different from musicology, and musicology are all the famous highfalutin folks like at Cornell and Princeton, and they're looking at classical music. They're looking at a script. They're looking at the score, and they're internally organizing and disorganizing the notes in the ways that they're put together. So the music exists without a context, and it exists without people actually creating the music. That's why I like ethnomusicology much better. It's about the people who are doing the deed rather than the deed itself. As an historian then, my job is to think about music as the outcome of historical change. So we sing or are musical in this way at this time and place because of this set of circumstances. Music has a context, history has a soundtrack, and it's not something that's frivolous or exists externally to the inner operations of culture and society. It is part and parcel, it is integrated, it is foundational to the ways we operate as human beings. Now, why do we do music in class? So let's think more classroom teaching right now. There's some practical issues. This is the ultimate in shared, Don McCormick, wonderful colleague, great, love the reacting to the past stuff, but this is shared authority like nothing else. Because the first thing that you do not have to be in order to be an ethnomusicologist, to incorporate popular music studies in your class, you don't have to be a musician. Because I'll guarantee you there are 15 musicians in your class already. Guaranteed. And if you don't know something, let them do the teaching. It's almost a flipped classroom in some ways. And that's one of the best parts for me. So the story I always tell in this regard is I had a student who got a 41 on his first exam. Bless his heart, right? And this guy was a rapper. I get lots of white and black rappers in my classes. And he got himself together and he got a 59 on the second exam. That's an improvement, folks. On the third exam, he got 71. I mean, that's a 30-point, because he was a musician. And then all of a sudden, he started to blossom in ways once we got to the 20th century and after World War II. And it was for two reasons. Your rap singers in your classes, they will be the smartest folks in the class. Two reasons. They understand media better than anybody else, and they understand power better than anybody else. And so don't worry about knowing or not knowing. Put the question out there, and I'll teach you some ways to do that today. Put the question out there and let them do the teaching. And you will integrate students. You'll get words out of people's mouths you never thought you would ever hear. Guaranteed. There are also ways that music cognitively, and there's some studies about this, but my colleagues in education are better versed at this than I am. All I can tell you is that people have taken my American music class, and then they go to other classes, and they'll say something out of nowhere. I've had my colleagues report back. And they say, well, so-and-so said X, Y, and Z about World War II without me even saying anything. How do you know that? Well, I was in McCusker's American music class, and we were talking about this, and the music helped me remember. There's something cognitively about music that elicits new kinds of learning, new kinds of remembering especially. So my aunt, who had full-on dementia, she'd sit there and sing with me all day long. And she knew the words. She can anticipate ideas. She knew the words, even though she didn't know what day of the week it was, who the President of the United States was, any of that. So there are ways that music elicits new ways to think about the world. And finally, practically speaking, music and history have a soundtrack. Music is a relationship between the performer and the audience. It's intrinsically about that relationship. And because that relationship exists now, we have an obligation to teach them about what that means. So I'm going to show you a picture at the end tonight, or this afternoon. The gal I know, Ann Powers, is not Lana Del Rey's, who's if you listen to your students, she's a very famous singer with 2.3 million Twitter followers. This gal I know, Ann Powers, is not Lana Del Rey's favorite person, and she told her Twitter following, and now my friend, this person I know, is just inundated with all this Twitter stuff. Bless their hearts, right? All right. The second set of issues, though, of why music is that there's some real theoretical issues involved with this. Cultural realms are sites of discussions about identity, politics, nationalism, and economics. So Jamie took my Great Depression class when it was still an on-the-ground class. It's 100% online now. And one of the movies we watch in that class, we watch a lot of movies because that's how people understood the Great Depression. I don't have a job, but I've got a nickel, so I'm going to go to the movies today, or I'm going to sneak into it. And the second movie we watched was Public Enemy from 1931. And it's a commentary on political authority in the early 1930s, because here's a couple bootleggers, Jimmy Cagney and another guy. And Cagney is pretty effective. The people who are ineffective are those who are in any sort of authority, the cops, the political officials. And so this cultural realm is a commentary. In another version, you know, I can find all sorts of music versions of this. It is a commentary on what people think about what America is at this deep moment in the Great Depression. So there's a set of folklore ideas called functionalism. Functionalism says that when applied to social and cultural material, music, film, other kinds of stuff, functionalists say that music serves a purpose. It has a social usefulness. So we know that music, for example, accompanies labor. And it manages and gives rhythm to certain kinds of labor. So this one that my students shared with me was from Outlander. And there's a scene in this romance story set on the Scottish Highlands in the 1700s. The history seems pretty good, but you folks might want to watch for yourself. And they're doing a working song. And it's not working W-O-R, it's like this. And what they've done is they've taken some urine and they are working it into some cloth, because the best way to get this cloth useful is to render it in this, I guess is urine and I'm not a scientist, but there's a row of women here, a row of women here, and they have to do it rhythmically. So the song accompanies moving this cloth through this urine in order to render it useful. Think about picking cotton. Jump down, turn around, pick a bale of cotton. Jump. That's lead belly. Lead belly. Yeah. Okay. Jump down, turn around, pick a bale of cotton. Jump down, turn around, pick a bale a day. So what it does is it moves the labor groups through in rhythm and moves them at a pace that keeps them going through the work. And I can come up with another dozen examples for you folks. But music has a social purpose. And that social purpose is ultimately the site of an historian's investigation. Why do we sing this way and in these circumstances at this time? So let's do some practicing. So what we're going to do is we're going to listen to 2 clips of music. And this is the practice portion of your afternoon. What I want you folks to do, and this is a methodology. Again, I'm dealing with students in my classes who may be musical, who may not be musical. And so I set it up this way. Listen to this song. It comes from 1963, written by Pete Seeger. The musicians are Peter, Paul, and Mary. You'll see them at the top. And they're singing at the March on Washington. So they bring this Pete Seeger song and they sing it. And you'll see some things in this rendering that are very interesting. What I want you to do is to think of an adjective, just 1, 2, that might describe the song. Think of one adjective that might describe the song. And then, for those of you, is anybody a musician in here, piano player, sing, do anything, play the radio, YouTube? That's my mother's claim to fame. No? Okay. Okay, So that's all of you, if you're not a musician. Think about the easiest access is to the lyrics, but I'll also talk about some of the ways that that adjective is made musically. Let your students do the work. You don't need to do this, okay? All right, Peter, Paul, and Mary, If I Had a Hammer from 1963. This is the March on Washington. They will be introduced by Ozzie Davis.
And now, a group of singers who have come to help express in song what this great meeting is all about. I give you now Peter, Paul, and Mary.
I'm not sure what kind of technology you have in your classrooms, but technologically, this stuff is very easy to access in my classroom. We have smart classrooms now. Is that true for you folks? Do you have access to this kind of tech? Okay, great. So it's very easy to get on YouTube, to get on Spotify. You can get your students on Spotify to create lists. Let them teach you, because they're going to have more time than I have to tell you. There's all sorts of great technology out there. I can't keep up with it, but they can. So let them do the deed. All right, so just shout out, folks, what kind of adjectives did you hear? Or what's your adjective that you would use to describe the song?
Say empowering.
Okay, empowering. What else?
Hopeful.
Who said hopeful? Hopeful, yes. What else?
Inspirational.
Inspirational. What else?
Uniting.
Uniting.
With a purpose.
Purposeful. Yeah, there's a motivational aspect to the song. Yeah, what else?
Just positive.
There's a positive vibe to it, isn't there? Yeah, positive vibe. All right, now I'm going to put you folks on the spot and see if you can help me talk about how do you make happy, hopeful music musically. What do you do with the various portions of that musical performance to make that sound, to give you that impression? And remember, you don't actually need to know this. Let your students go wild, okay? How do you make it? Yes, ma'am.
the type of like minor key versus major key?
Okay, it's a major key. In American popular music, folks, if you want happy major chord key, you use major chords, especially in the keys of C, F, and D, G too, okay? There's a whole lot of, one of the videos I gave you to look at in the Dropbox is Rob Paravonian, who's basically arguing that there's a good portion of the American popular music catalog is rooted in Pachelbel's canon in D. It's not canon in D. What it is that a certain set of notes, a certain set of major chords that everybody repeats over and over again in multiple songs, okay? And so it's familiar to you too. Whether or not your ears trained to hear it, your ears or your brains do register it. How else do you make happy, hopeful music?
Rhythm.
Yes, tempo, right? How fast or how slow does this song go? So, okay. So I've always been a backup singer, so counting is not my forte. So if I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning. It's pretty fast, huh? Yeah, there you go. See? All right, what else? How else do you make happy, hopeful music?
The lyrics.
Lyrics, yes. Tell me about the lyrics, somebody. We've got, if I had a hammer, if I had a bell, if I had a song, what happens at the end?
I've got a hammer.
I've got the hammer. It goes to the positive act. I have it. So what you folks, when you're saying purposeful, yes, it's also symbolic. There's a lot of symbolism in there. A hammer of justice, bell of freedom, song about love. So symbolically, there's, so if you're teaching an English class, that's a great way to teach metaphor. Or reinforce your English colleagues' discussions of metaphor. Okay, so it's also acoustic music. You can pick up an acoustic guitar and take it wherever you want to go. And Mary Travers is singing, and Mary has this beautiful voice. It's lovely to listen to. If I had a hammer, just very nice and melodic. And it's pleasing to listen to. But in the end, folks, this is a 3-minute pop song. And the reason we know it's a 3-minute pop song that people are listening on the radio is what? How do we know people are listening to this?
Sing along.
They were singing. Yeah. It's a 3-minute pop song that everybody knew. All right, now we're going to move forward to 1970, actually June 1970, and I'm going to play this song. And you told me don't cut out of my thing. All right, here we go. Okay, let me set this up. This is Ohio by Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. Comes out June 1970. It is 1 month after the Kent State shootings, okay?
Tin soldiers and Nixon coming. We're finally on soldiers and Nixon's coming. We're finally on our own. This summer I hear the drumming. For dead in Ohio. For dead in Ohio. For dead in Ohio. For dead in Ohio. For dead in Ohio.
Now, again, same exercise. What's your adjective? Give me an adjective.
Powerful.
Huh? Say that.
Combative.
Combative, yes. What was over here?
Powerful.
Powerful.
Shocking.
Warning.
Sad.
Sad.
Intense.
Yeah, wicked intense. What was the one over here?
Pain.
By the way, another way that your students are interacting with music is putting these kinds of videos together. They're scripting them, which is a very interesting thing to watch them do because they understand the music, and what they're doing is drawing different kinds of reactions, and some of them are actually making some money off of this, believe it or not. Jeremy, did you
Just
know?
really quickly, when I had you in class, we compared and contrasted Southern Man by Neil Young and Sweet Home Alabama.
Yes.
So I had my students do that, but do a modern day take on that. But it had to be popular. It had to be 2010 or later, and it had to have no explicit lyrics because we were playing it in class. And I used to listen to like pop culture music, but I don't much anymore. There was a song called "Pumped Up Kicks"
Oh God!
that they all
Foster the
knew,
People.
and I did not know that song, but it reminded me very much of this. And to see them be so knowledgeable of this song, I mean, everybody knew it, and I was oblivious to it, but it very much reminds me of this and its popularity and its message.
Yes. So, Pumped Up Kicks, Foster the People. I can't remember. Scott Foster, I think. And it's about kids who have on good shoes and somebody shoots and kills them so they can get the shoes away from them. Okay, it's actually a great little song, but it's also one of those classic half of the American musical catalog is in G, F, C, or D. This one is Emadiga. I can name 6 songs off the top of my head that is in the same key, the same exact chords. Foster the People, one of Taylor Swift's songs, Do You Belong to Me? That's E minor, G, D, A as well. John Anderson, Seminole Wind, which is a country music song. And so one of the other parts of this too is by taking that song, what you can do is you can say, well, they play this song in different genre with these same exact notes. How do you make those differences, first of all? And second of all, what does that mean? You know, so Seminole Wind by Johnny Anderson has a lot of steel guitar in it. And that's an instrument that's typically associated with country music. So why is that country music and yet it's the same song as every other song, right? All right. Okay, so I'm going to add a couple more adjectives. I'm going to add angry. And I'm going to add not mourning, but grief. Somebody said sad, and that's absolutely true. Okay, so you have a sort of set of issues on the left side. Same question, how do you make angry, mad music? What's there that we didn't have 5 minutes ago in the Hammer song?
You've got some minor keys in there.
You better believe it. And in American popular music, we associate minor keys with feeling sad or angry. Minor chords, minor key. Those are 2 separate things, but yes. Okay.
It's kind of like a funeral dirge.
Yes, exactly. So how do you do a dirge? You use minor chords.
Sort of a repetitive bass line.
Well, you've got a rhythm section, so bass and drum, and so you've got a different set. The tempo is very different. It's very much slowed down. Tin soldiers and Nixon's coming, right?
It's almost like a battle combative because
Yes.
you've got the beat that goes with a battle.
Yeah. So
almost
there's
like your military marches.
Absolutely, there's a combativeness about the song. Tin Soldiers and Nixon's coming. We're finally on our own. This summer I hear the drumming, 4 dead in Ohio. If that's not a, you know what, folks, get your guns out because they're coming for us next, in a 3-minute pop song that made it onto the charts and went, I think, to number 12 or something like this. I don't know what is. Well, how else? What else do we need to add up there musically? Again, your students will be able to do this.
Neil Young's voice is much different, right? It's everything he sings kind of sounds angry, but
Yes.
his voice is way different from Mary's voice, which is high. Yeah.
The soft and sweet.
Yeah, no, this isn't soft and sweet. This is Tin Soldiers and Nixon's coming. Yeah, I made the mistake once, not in your class and not in your class, of saying, geez, Neil Young can't sing. And I have a student who still isn't speaking to me because of that. There are certain things you shouldn't say to your students, just telling you now. You got this nasal voice, but it works. In 1970, it works. Combative, nasal tone. And then the other one I'm going to put down too is that the electric guitar is critical to this song. And electric guitars, what I explain musical notes to my students is I'll pull out an orange. And what a well-tuned acoustic guitar will do is that the orange, you stay within the orange. Because perfect pitch is hearing a note, or in our orange metaphor, hearing it straight down the middle. We are normal human beings. We are not demigods of music. And so we can hear the note this way, and it will sound in tune to us. But the people who have perfect pitch, they only hear straight down the middle, okay? There's a reason for, okay. What electric guitars did was they took those notes, those oranges, and exploded them. And so they bend the sound becomes bigger and more dissonant. And the obvious example is what? Star Spangled Banner by Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock, yeah. Because it's about irony, it's about comment, it's about, you want this to be pretty. I don't think we're doing very much pretty stuff right now, so let me do something with all that dissonance that explodes the sound and requires us to think about it. Now, I heard a story from a teacher earlier this week where the kids were in charge of playing the Star Spangled Banner, and they put that one up, which was interesting to me. No, it's an interesting historical statement. Okay, now you're standing, and hopefully folks can see my chicken scratch here. Sorry about that. What's the argument? And they'll get this. What's the argument that you make about, remember, history is about change over time. What's the change over time here? Yes, sir.
One thing I noticed with this too, it kind of reflects the societies of the 60s and 70s. Like the 60s, it's kind of like those, what's saying, rose-colored glasses were still on, because you kind of see that love in the 1960s, that kind of positive. In the 1970s, you kind of see that reflection of everything that went on in the 60s, like Kennedy's assassination, shooting MLK.
Hold on to that for just a second. But yeah, absolutely, folks. Moment of idealism. We're going to change the world. We got problems. We're going to fix it. By 1970, we're about to be the ones to be fixed. There's a problem. Tin Soldiers and Nixon's coming. And so by 1970, there was a new way to be singing. Now, what's the first question you ask your students at that point? Because somebody's going to get that. I'll guarantee you. Even if you say, well, just what do you got there? Yes, sir.
What's the turning point there? When and where is the turning point?
And what's the big? Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
From that idealism of the 60s versus the 1970s, and how has it affected common society today?
Yes, those are good questions, absolutely, but there's an even more basic question to answer here. What's the basic question to ask? It's great in 1963, things stink in 1970. What's the question?
What's changed?
Why has it changed? It's a real basic. So you're absolutely right. But the first question to say is why. And so, Jeremy, we get back to your students then. And the question to them with Pumped Up Kicks is, well, why do we sing like this now?
Well, that's kind of what I was wondering. Like, they were buying into the 1963 song. Well, they were singing along to it. Well, they're also, I would hypothesize, they're singing along to that. So the heart condition of the American people has changed with the music. Like, the music is a public opinion, not public opinion, but
Almost like a temperature gauge.
yes, exactly. It's measuring the temperature. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, but it's also forming the thermometer in the first place.
It is, because it's a piece of media that's putting out there, where social media is affecting us more today than music is. But I mean, the music.
Oh, I would say it's both. I mean, they're one and the same. Yes.
Still battling. I mean, they're still fighting. You know, from 63 to 70, we're still fighting the calls or causes or what we want changed. It's still going on.
Yes, and we're still using music as a way to fight it out. So it's the temperature gauge and it's the thermometer.
And we're still in Vietnam during those times. I mean, that whole time.
And so the thing is, for your students, then you ask the question why, and let them tell you. Let them tell you what the music says, which you've already done, and then ask that quintessential historian's question. Why? Why the change? And how, again, and music, we want to say the 60s are extra special in some ways because it's become its own popular media stuff every decade. So let's talk about some of the ways other decades do the same thing. This is just really obvious. Okay, so we can look at other decades and see the ways that music is both the outcome of the historical change and critical to the change in the first place. Yes, sir.
Really quickly, so with the 1960s and after the availability to get controversial songs that speak to the moment is pretty easy. As far as me giving this to my students, what eras? I'm sure by the 1920s it's fairly easy to get a hold of. Like when and how early in American history can I start sending them out to YouTube and Spotify to start picking out songs, whether it be the Gilded Age or imperialism or World War I? When can I start doing that?
Got no mama now. Oh, ain't got no mama now. They told me late last night, you don't need no mama no how. Black snake crawling in my room. Black snake crawling in my room. Some pretty mama better come and get this black snake too.
Anything you want is on YouTube. Anything you want is on YouTube.
I had kids just recently go as far back as the 1800s where they had remade it because they were looking at the dance and how dance was affecting, because dance is connected with music, but how the dance affects, how they danced was affecting what society was doing. And my kids had to pull up and do 1-minute presentations. And I really was shocked. It might be a modern day video, but it showed what they did, and as you watched it, there's one called the potato mash dance, and it was in like the 1920s, I think, and when they pulled it up and you showed it, you could see why they would have done that, and then they talked about what group of people brought it in, and so you were bringing in your ethnicities into it, but you also were seeing why.
Okay, absolutely. I'm looking for Earl, Snake Hips. One of the things I put on your list was, first of all, Judson Lapley's There we go. Snake hips. All right. Was Jackson Lapely's evolution of dance? This is 40s, 30s. So you can pull those, if there's a clip for it, or if there's a, because there's all these nerdy record collectors and all these nerdy film clip collectors, and YouTube has become this clearinghouse for all of it. If it exists, it's there. If it doesn't exist, you call the Center for Popular Music, you talk to Martin Fisher, and you say, Martin, Chris McCusker told me to tell you to get this song for me from the earliest incarnation. So one of the things they have in there, what they've been doing in there, they've got this really great old Victrola, and they've been recording Alison Krauss on it. It's wonderful. Oh my God, it's awesome. Yeah, so that was about a year ago, 2 years ago, but still. All right. So, Jeremy, absolutely. You know, one of the downsides to this is how do you access it? The upside is that because of the digital age, what's the easiest thing to digitize besides a photo? A song. So if it's not there, it's really easy to get. Now, a lot of, we're working, Brent Martin and I are working on a book on the intersections between public history and ethnomusicology. Because in Middle Tennessee alone, there are 12 major archives or music museums. And the idea is but when we went and started to look and say, well, aren't we special? And it turns out we're not. There's like 12,000 in the United States. So the ways you do this, and I think I put this on your Dropbox form, is that you Google the artist and primary sources or recordings. So find your good Google search terms, and those will help you get to exactly what you need, okay? And in a pinch, you call me and say, Chris, I need this, and I call Martin for you. Okay, all right. So we looked at the 60s because it's been so fetishized in our popular imagination, but I can take you to any decade that in the post-Civil War era, and before that too, because a lot of the first commercially available pieces of music were pre-Civil War songs. So in the 1880s, when we still make music on our own, we do it differently. You know, Bob and the Girls and non-nuclear family singers still exist in other people's families. But we have other alternatives now, and so to hear music, it doesn't require us to learn to play unless we really are motivated to do that. But in the initial decades of the Industrial Revolution, that mass expansion after the Civil War, and so I'm talking about that one, not the pre-Civil War stuff, the assembly line fundamentally reframes what music is. First of all, by making printing presses, and printing presses make other people's music available to you, and it starts to winnow down the number of keys and starts to create an American musical canon that didn't exist before. And there used to be all sorts of different ways to play. Some people played notes that looked like the orange. Some people played notes that looked like an apple. Some people played notes that looked like a giraffe. But one by one, they started to pick off the giraffes and then the apples. And so now we have a scale that we understand that other countries don't, because they play outside of the Western European bloc. All right, but that's that starting point where printing presses say, this is how we play this music. You got to tune it right. You got to play the right notes. Don't play those old notes anymore. They made assembly lines that made instruments possible. So if you were a young woman, you most likely played a piano, and most likely if you were middle class, your family could afford it. Banjos, which was a woman's instrument, believe it or not, and guitars, they became cheaper. Brass bands, there's really no brass bands until the 1880s and 1890s because it was too expensive to buy the instrument, to make them and then buy them. But after the 1880s, go buy yourself a trumpet, it's cheap. Oh, and by the way, go play John Philip Sousa while you're at it. Recording technology was also new, and the ones that initial records, and you'll find these on YouTube, were geared toward people from Poland, people from Italy, people from Russia. They're not geared toward waspy people who came from the British Isles before Civil War. It's a very interesting thing. It's geared towards these new ethnic populations. Okay, so that's the 1880s, and you could take that up to World War I. In the 1920s, the democratization of goods arguments. Are you folks familiar with that? There's a new kind of citizenship. It has nothing to do with political rights. It has to do with the kind of goods that are produced that cater to your specific tastes. I'm black, I live in the South, I migrate north. All of a sudden, there are records that I want to purchase, me specifically. Oh, and I've got some money, I can buy them. And so in the 1920s, you can link that up with consumer spending, which then elicits what? The Great Depression. Okay. You can talk about the Great Migration. The Great Migration is what created country music and blues music. They didn't exist before, at least as a coherent set of musical practices, until the 1920s when people moved north, said, I want to hear music that sounds like home, but I don't really want to be there. So let's listen to things like Bessie Smith, Mamie Smith. 1930s, we talked a lot about the American Archive of American Folk Song, which is still online and you can still access through the Library of Congress's websites. Basically, there's a canon of American folk music that was written down in the 19th century by a guy named Francis Childs. They're called child ballads because he, quote unquote, discovered them. And they keep coming up over and over and over again. It's a body of music that is emotional support for some ways. So in the 30s, it comes back up again, and it gets put into the Archive of American Folk Song. Guess when it comes back up again? The 1960s, very good. And it comes back up in the 1990s. I Am a Man of Constant Sorrow is a child ballad from the 1800s. In the 1950s, the kind of music that you listened to was about falling in love, because Ward and June Cleaver didn't work if you didn't fall in love and get married and become domestically contained. It's about shutting off other possibilities. Who says, oh, no, 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 that's not true? What's the reaction? Who's the reaction?
Elvis.
Yeah, it's Elvis. Elvis is like, oh, heck no, right? Okay, so there are different decades in which the musical processes and productions will lead you down a path to the history and is another way to get at it. So you can do the kind of analyses that I'm talking about here, or you can do look at the production as examples of industrial production, or as ways to understand a zeitgeist, what are people thinking. Before I end, I wanted to show you this picture. I'm going to be on TV tomorrow night at 6:30 as a lead-in to the country music, Ken Burns, and they ask these women here to talk about Old Town Road by Lil Nas X. This is Lana Del Rey's not friend, the strawberry blonde right there. That's Ann Powers. They went after her. And if you folks are interested and you have a Monday night off, yeah, right. The woman on the right side next to me, that's Tiara, who's one of the song suffragettes at the listening room. And you go up, you buy a $5 ticket, you pay $15 for food and drink, you sit and watch these women sing. These are women who want to make it into the country music industry, and they want to do it in support of each other rather than as a competition. And so that's who the Song Suffragettes are. She's lovely. Although the funniest comment was somebody made, LaTanya Tucker, who's the producer for that, she said, well, what's the hardest thing about being a black woman in country music? And she said, well, they want me to iron my hair. LaTanya looked at her and said, isn't country music all about having big hair? Why do they want it? She's lovely. Anyways, thank you all very much. I want to know what you folks have to say or give me some ideas, because I'm going to steal from y'all too, not just one way. Yes, sir.
I know. I was just sitting here because I'm starting Revolutionary War battles. I just punched it in on YouTube. It was going all the way back to the Revolutionary War. So I may make the news because they're thinking they're a little redhead traditional teacher that they have had wars with the last 6 weeks. And wait a minute, that boy must have had a stroke over the weekend. He's going from straight textbook to New Age in 48 hours.
Yeah, yeah. It'll be there. And keep in mind that the first recordings occurred in the 1870s and 1880s, and so what people are interpreting is going to be sheet music that was written down. And so you're going to get a facsimile of the sound rather than an actual sound. It's only when the song is recorded as you've played it, so 1880s. If that's what you're looking for, you're going to get a good approximate. Before 1880, you're going to get a good approximation. Sorry. Thank you for whatever the word is. Yeah. What else, folks?
Can I selfishly ask a question? I'm not
Yes,
supposed
you
to,
can ask
but
a
you're here,
question,
so I
Andy.
get to just cross the hall too. Do you? How difficult do you find using modern music, right, in terms of parallels? I know you said this. Do students usually grasp that stuff pretty well of interpreting modern music in the same way, analyzing it in the way that you kind of teach them to do about stuff in the past?
So the first time when I started teaching this kind of stuff, this is an old lesson that I've had for a while because it's very easy and it's very accessible. And when I started to develop that as a graduate teaching assistant in Indiana in the 90s, we had a discussion about that question. And the comment at that time was, we don't have anything to sing about. And so their response was that their music had no political edge to it, that it had nothing like that. But it was also right when rap was starting to become mainstream. I would argue your students see something different now. And one of the books that I suggested for you folks is a very, very good book on rap and its cultural beginnings and historical beginnings. Because, again, your rap guys, whether I call them the Slim Shadys, the white guys who rap, and then black guys, they will be the smartest ones in your class because they get power and they get the media better than anybody. So I haven't had that problem since. It's an interesting question, though, to ask. You know, does your music have a political edge? There is a tendency, and it began in the 1960s, to make a division that rock and roll, or rock as it became, rock and roll is black and white men singing. Rock is just the white guy standing up there playing his guitar. And pop, so rock or rock and roll is the political music. It's the call to arms. Pop is a bunch of pablum, according to the ways people understand that division. And all you have to do is listen to Lady Gaga and just, don't be a drag, just be a queen. I mean, if that's not political, I don't know what is. So.
Motown, Dancing in the Streets, is a call to arms for the civil rights movement.
Absolutely. And, you know, Jamie, that's a book I should have put on. There's a book called Dancing in the Streets, actually, literally, by Suzanne Smith, who Berry Gordy wanted to sell records. He didn't want to be political. Oh my God, Marvin Gaye did. Stevie Wonder did. So when we were sitting there waiting to go on one night with Barry Manilow, 3 very large black men walked out of a room. and it was February 1983. And somebody I was sitting with thankfully recognized who it was. It was Marvin Gaye. And he says, "That's Marvin." "Hi, Marvin!" And I'm like, oh my God, greatness. And then his father killed him a year later. Jeremy, did you want to?
I have a question. Sure. This is kind of an odd question. I don't know if you can answer. So I wonder, so it's kind of a multi-pronged question. Yes. One is, I think about my young students in high school.
Yes.
And I would just take a hypothesis and say that most of those don't listen to like the actual radio. They're doing it on their phones.
Absolutely.
Okay, and so to that point, with the adult group that I hang with socially outside of work, they're always talking about how society is so secular and profane and political, and because I tell them about the Pumped Up Kick song. And then I think about our local area here in Middle Tennessee, and there's 3 Christian contemporary, the Way FM, The Fish, and K-Love.
Yeah.
So what does that say about the secularization of our culture, the religious? I mean, if we're looking at music and we look at radio and we see religious music thriving, secular music, I mean, how does that speak to one, our culture, and two, the impact that music has on it? Does my question make sense?
I actually think that's a really great way to get your students to think about time, place, and musical expression. Because the answer is that there's something for everybody, and as long as there's a demand, because there are 2 ways to think about music: as a commercial act, and then as a human act. Gotcha. Now, I do a lot of church music. In fact, I'm playing a week from Sunday, and then I'm playing the weekend after, because that's what I do now as a musician. It's not recorded, it's not put out for commercial purposes, but I have a ball, and we spend all our time doing it. So one of the things you have to keep in mind is that just because I'm answering sort of off my head here, so sorry, it's typical. There are the moments that are commercial, and there are the moments that are sacred. And sometimes those intersect, and sometimes they don't. And sometimes you don't want them to. Gotcha. I would also argue that this conversation about the ways that modern culture keeps becoming more and more secular, people have been arguing that since when, Andy, the religious historian? And folks, that puts us almost right at 3 o'clock, and you've had a really great day, but I know because Andy put something really great together for you, but I also know that you must be tired after a full week of work. So thank you all very much. Thank you for giving.